I used to think growth was about becoming someone better, someone smarter, someone stronger, more capable. But I've come to learn something else, something quieter, something truer. Real growth isn't about adding, it's about subtracting. It's about letting go of the stories you inherited, about who you thought you should be, what success means, what's acceptable to feel, and really how you're supposed to live. Most of us didn't choose those stories. They were given to us. From parents, teachers, culture, religion, media, they shaped how we see ourselves. And over time, we mistook those stories for the truth. Maybe you were told to be strong and not show weakness. Maybe you were taught to achieve at all costs. Or maybe you learned that love had to be earned. That being sensitive made you weak. Or that your worth depended on what you had to do. And none of those are facts. They're adaptations. They're defense mechanisms. And the longer that we live inside of them, the further that we drift from who we actually are. So if you feel stuck in your own growth, if you keep chasing goals, improving routines, trying to be that ideal version of yourself but still feel empty, maybe it's not because you're not doing enough. Maybe it's because you're carrying too much that was never yours. Growth happens when we really stop performing, when we stop trying to become someone. And really, when we start remembering who we were before we learned how to hide. And that remembering, it's not glamorous. It's slow, it's messy, and it begins with discomfort. Something in you feels off. Something in you feels fake. You're tired of pretending. And that's the crack in the shell. That's where the real work begins. And it's not about knowing exactly who you are. It's about being willing to question who you've been. To say, maybe that version of me, the one who was always composed, always chasing, always proving, isn't actually me. Maybe I don't have to keep it all together. And maybe I can stop trying to be extraordinary and just learn to be human. And that's the invitation of unlearning. And it's not passive, it's not giving up. It's really courage. Because taking off the mask, even the one you hate, is terrifying because it's the only one you know. But under all those layers is someone that you've forgotten. Someone who didn't have to earn their worth. Someone who didn't have to hustle for love. Someone who felt deeply, moved freely, and believed in wonder. And they're still there. They've just been waiting for you to come back. So here's the thing. You didn't choose what to believe about yourself. Again, you inherited this from your parents, from culture, whatever. And from those moments in your childhood that were imprinted on you without your permission. You were being rewarded for being agreeable, or you were shamed for when you showed too much emotion. You were told who you were and where you had to be, and eventually you started to believe it. And over time, that belief, it became your identity. And not because it's who you are, but because it's what felt safest. And that's what this work is about. It's not about adding more. It's about taking off the mask, the one you didn't even know you were wearing. It's the mask that is so close to you, it feels like your skin. It feels like a part of you, but it's not. We were not born disconnected. We were taught to disconnect in order to survive. And unlearning is the slow process of remembering. Remembering that your sensitivity isn't weakness, it's awareness. And that your anger isn't a flaw, it's a signal. And that your longing means you're still alive in there. And that's why real growth doesn't always feel good, because it's not always clean. Sometimes you feel more lost before you feel found. Sometimes the truth shakes up everything you thought was solid. But that's not failure. That's what healing feels like. And no one talks about how disorienting it is to realize that you've been performing for most of your life. or how painful it is to look back and see how much of your joy, how much of your creativity and your voice was buried just to keep the peace, or to be liked, or to just make it through the day. But here's what's possible. When you stop abandoning yourself to be accepted, you start becoming someone you actually like. And I believe that that is real success. And not the version of you, or not the version of success that someone else scripted for you, but the one, the one that wasn't built on your achievements that you never really cared about, but the kind of success that feels like you're coming home to yourself. So the next time you feel like you don't know who you are, consider the fact that maybe you're shedding what you're actually not. And this isn't about figuring it all out. This is about staying with yourself long enough to remember. Remember what you loved before you needed to be impressive. Remember what you felt like before you learned to just numb it out. Remember what it felt like just to be before someone told you that you had to earn your worth. You don't have to perform here, and you don't have to be polished. You just have to be honest, because the truth, your truth, is the doorway back to your true self. So what happens after you unlearn? After you peel off the layers, stop performing, and finally start to feel who you are underneath everything. It's about learning how to live from the inside out. And that means no longer letting the world decide your value. No longer outsourcing your own self-worth to people who don't actually see you for who you are. No longer abandoning what's real just to feel comfortable. Living from the inside out means asking yourself, what do I really want? What actually matters to me? Not what would look good to someone else. Not what would be impressive, but what feels true. And this is where things start to shift. You stop chasing for approval. You start choosing alignment with your values. You stop filling up every moment of your life with distraction, and you start making space for what you feel, even when it's uncomfortable. You stop pretending to be fine, and you start getting honest. With yourself first, and then with others and the people around you. You start moving slower, not because you're lazy, but because you're done performing. And you realize that peace isn't found in achieving more. It's found in being more yourself. And if you begin to understand something that most people will never realize, self-worth doesn't come from what you do. It comes from what you're willing to feel. And that's why the inner work matters. Not because it makes you special, but because it makes you real. And when you're real, people feel it. And you don't have to try so hard. You don't have to sell yourself. You just have to show up, grounded in your own truth, open enough to connect, and clear enough to choose. And that's how you start building a life that feels good to live. One decision at a time, intentionally. One honest moment at a time. You stop asking, what do they want from me? And start asking, what do I want for myself? You stop performing in a role, and you start becoming the author of your own life. And no, it won't be perfect. You'll mess up. You'll fall back into your old patterns, and you will still forget who you are sometimes. But now you know how to return, and now you know how to listen to yourself, and now you know how to feel again. And that's the difference, and that's power. So if you're here, if you're walking through this mess of becoming, don't stop. You're not behind. You're not broken. You are becoming. Not someone new, but someone true. And the world doesn't need a better version of who you think you should be. It needs you fully, honestly, here and now.